What are the major stakes to consider as South Africa braces for national elections this year 2024? What factors have led to the ANC losing its popularity 30 years after the apartheid period? And can a political coalition rewrite governance narratives in South Africa? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this weekend edition of the program Global Insight. Today we take focus on the election calendar, and our case study is South Africa. We want to analyze what to watch for, or the major stakes, as the ruling African National Congress seems to be losing popularity ahead of the May 29th national elections. It should be noted that the political atmosphere of South Africa seems to be at a crossroad as the ruling African National Congress faces dwindling popularity ahead of the upcoming general elections built for the 29th of May 2024. Popular opinion holds that the ruling ANC party may not attain a 50% representation in parliament. Opening prospects for a political coalition. First, we dive into the key factors and potential outcomes that would define this critical moment in South Africa's political landscape. Stay connected as we explore the implications of the ANC's declining favor, and also watch what to watch out for as the nation prepares to cast their ballot in a pivotal election in the Republic of South Africa. This is Global Insight. You are most welcome. And if you are just tuning in, you're welcome to For You Media Africa, your Pan-African television, and you're on the platform Global Insight, your discursive, informative, and insightful program that brings light into topical issues affecting the African continent and the global world at large. It is election here for some countries, and South Africa, one of the Africa's buoyant economies, is bracing for national elections in the month of May, and we're asking what are the major stakes, what are the points to watch out for as the political landscape of South Africa seems to be taking another turning point in the present context. It should be noted, of course, I won't be doing this alone. It's time for us to uncover the panel of experts that will elucidate more on our problematics this day, to look at the political situation in South Africa, analyze the stakes ahead of the presidential elections, and also what will become of the political atmosphere after the May 29 elections. I'll be taking you straight away to the Republic of South Africa, and glad to introduce to you Dr. Charles Sinkala, President Africa 55 States. Hello to you, Dr. Sinkala. It's a pleasure having you this day, and you're welcome to For You Media.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being invited on such an occasion.
Looking forward to having fruitful and constructive discussions pertaining our topic for discussion this year. We are going to stay in South Africa this time around with the PASEKA PHARUMELE Academia, and also a member of the Convention for Pan-Africanism and Progress. Hello to you, Mr. PHARUMELE, and thanks for joining us this day.
Good day, Clarice. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having this engagement with my fellow panelists, who I know are well equipped with discourse. So it is an exciting time for me. Thank you very much for inviting me.
always an exciting moment as we discuss topics which are pertinent to the African continent. It's a moment of global transformation, and the African continent should not be left behind. So we discuss the stakes, the political stakes that will define or continue to define the future of the country. Just to note that in any moment from now, other guests will be joining in, but we continue with the analysis with you. Let's start with a holistic view of what you think are the political or the predictions of the forthcoming elections in the Republic of South Africa. To you, Dr. Charles Sinkala.
Thank you very much. Greetings to your viewers, and as well as greetings to fellow panelists and those who will be joining us. It's such an occasion that we brace ourselves as African continent, you know, to celebrate and demonstrate the democratic dispensation that we've carried over for many years in the African continent. I think it's safe to say that we enjoy the free and fair elections, although not free and fair elections, on the southern part of Africa as compared to the western region. To God be the glory that it hasn't been as good as it has been on the southern part of the African continent. But it is safe to say that, you know, these elections that will be held here in South Africa will be very historic, in the sense that for the first time since the 1994, a lot of participants are participating, whether politically or just voluntarily, or those who would like just to have some change. And I'm sure we have seen a lot of panelists who has criticized or analyzed whatever which has been happening during the rule of the 30 years rule of the ANC. Absolutely. But many of them has failed to understand why has it been like this, and these are the questions that the ANC has failed themselves as well to answer in terms of the democratic dispensation and the governance of South Africa. And as well as the President of Africa 55 states and Organization of African Political Parties, we have engaged the ANC on various platforms in terms of seeing what has been the cause and what has been the problem, you know, apart from the internal wrangles of the ANC. As well, we have not to forget about the recession in 2008, and as well as the COVID pandemic in 2019. These are factors internally which has affected the governance of the African National Congress, the only longest-serving political party that I'm aware of on the African continent. But of course, one will also understand that these elections will be historic in the sense that for the first time we'll have a lot of political parties that has endorsed, including the endorsement of the former president Jacob Zuma, who's now participating, you know, in terms of having his right as well to participate in these elections. But again, we have to understand on the African continent, what is happening to South Africa is not different from what is happening in Zambia. It is not different from what is happening in Monrovia, where I'm coming from. It is not different from what is happening in Mozambique and many other 55 African states. You know, it is completely the same, where we have seen the transition and the short-lived of liberation movements such as the ANC. We see what is happening as well, the confrontation in Uganda. We see what is happening, the confrontation in the ZANU-PF just nearby here in Zimbabwe, and many others. And I think most analysts has safely said that liberation movement cannot govern. And I think ANC should have to prove the point to the contrary, that they have the willpower to govern, even in the midst of the diversity of problems internally and externally, coupled with geopolitics. But we shall see what will happen after the 30th of May, once the elections are held. And we hope and pray that we shall have free and fair elections. Although not free and fair, there will be some sectors in society who might feel that the elections won't be free, but you know, this is part of democracy. It's a game. There will be some losers and there will be some winners. At the end of the day, the dispensation of African movement and the agenda for Africa must move forward.
Indeed, the agenda for Africa must move forward to state that recently political parties in South Africa pledged that they are going to ensure free and fair elections and, of course, a peaceful conduct of the crucial 2024 elections. I'm going to come to you this time around, PASEKA PHARUMELE. We are looking at South Africa, a country that has gone through a lot in the past 30 years, and we see the 2024 elections period being a very critical or crucial one for the country and, of course, the continent Africa. So what are your perspectives holistically pertaining the developments which have marked South Africa in the past months, gearing up to the 29th of May national elections that would define a new phase or a new turn in the political landscape of the Southern African nation?
Thank you very much, Clarice. Thank you for that question. In general, I think from an honest point of view, I do not see much of a difference between this coming election and the previous ones. I do understand, though, that a lot of people, especially those who are in politics and in governing political parties, they've argued that this is our biggest election over the last several years, in a sense that it is an election for them that can be comparable to the 1994 election in South Africa. As we all know, that was the election that inevitably led us to what we now regard as democracy. Yeah. And they argue that this is the most important election, but I am of the perception that it generally is not, because I see it as an election like any other election based off one fact, the fact that South Africa has consistently seen itself in a position of danger from 1994, where we thought that there would be a total collapse of the country if, not where we thought, but where the racist right-wing government and its supporters, apartheid supporters, had been making the argument that once the ANC takes over, there's going to be an inevitable collapse of the country. I genuinely believe that in actual fact this does not hold true, and I think that we see it until this day. There has been a steady decline in South Africa's infrastructure, in South Africa's economy, and etc. But the reality of the matter is that the trajectory that these supporters of the apartheid government and those who were still in the country still very negative towards the governing party post-apartheid, it has not been achieved, and we are not anywhere near that trajectory and the level of collapse that they had anticipated. But with that being said, I am aware of how dangerous the ANC is as a party and where it is going. I do not think that is as urgent as the other opposition parties have tried to make it seem, as though that if the ANC continues to govern, we are going to have a serious decline and a serious collapse of the country in the next 2 to 3 years. I do not see that happening because, as I said, historically that has been the argument and the narrative, but it has not happened. However, as I said, I do know that if the ANC succeeds, there's going to be a substantial decline in the socio-economic standing of the country. And I genuinely do think that this is what is going to happen. We are going to find ourselves in a position where the ANC is going to continue to govern post this this election. Why I make this argument and why I do not see them being removed from power? Ideally, I would want them to be removed from power, but realistically, from my own observations and analysis, what I have come to note and to see is that the political parties that everyone assumes should be in the process of taking up the ANC have all committed to be willing to go into coalition or to be giving their votes to the ANC post the election, just so that they can hold specific positions within government in the coming 4 years post-election. So that what I mean is that the DA has indicated that it is willing to go into a coalition with the ANC, and they've done it for many years now. It's not the first time that they say it going into this coming election. The EFF, which we had assumed 4 years ago was going to be a much bigger threat to the ANC, has also committed to say that they are not going to be the official opposition, and this is not their words, but from what they have portrayed is that they understand that they will not be the automatic over majority opposition. What they're going to be is to be what they became or what they were 4 years ago, which was kingmakers. So what they are arguing is that instead of going into a coalition with anyone else in trying to topple the ANC, what we are going to do is we are going to give our votes to the ANC again, as long as they can give us certain privileges and positions, so that we can be able to we can be able to successfully. Sorry, I just needed to finish that, but you may go ahead. Sorry, guys.
Okay, of course, we are going to come back to analyzing the point which you highlighted, of course, in your introductory statement pertaining our topic for discussion. This is the time for us to actually welcome the other guests or experts who just joined in now. I just want to welcome Good News CADOGAN, a Pan-African leadership coach to the program Global Insight, and of course welcoming you with this first question, looking at the political rhetorics that are surrounding the pre-election 2024 election atmosphere in the Republic of South Africa. What have you to say pertaining this, Mr. CADOGAN?
Thank you very much, Clarice, and greetings to my fellow panelists and everybody else that is listening online. This is a very difficult analysis because there's a lot that is at stake here. But I would like to begin with the issue of global transformation, that all political parties, especially on the continent, because that's where we are now, they serve in collaboration or in acceptance of the rest of the world. Because if they operate as if they're in a laboratory where the rest of the world is not part of their governance, philosophy, and leadership, they tend to fail. There are three issues that are important for this election. It's healthcare, it's inequality between black people and white people, it's education and access thereto. And these three things are slam bang in the center of the ANC's election manifesto. There is another set of things that are important. The first one being corruption. Corruption is the same, that I would say, it is the same as inequality. It is the same as apartheid in terms of the challenge that it poses to our country. And the recent State Capture report names by name many leaders in the ANC. And as a result, the ANC being the governing party and being the one that is at the forefront of corruption, even the own president said that they are accused number one when it comes to corruption. Crime in general is another set of challenges that joins corruption as a major thing. But the third one in this pack of things is economic growth. The ticket on which the ANC ran the last manifesto, it was that it was going to bring growth to the economy. There are a number of challenges that make it not so easy for any party, including the ANC, to actually deal with that. The structural dynamics and also the colonial value chain means that whatever we take out of the ground in minerals or in agri-products, we export as is without adding value. When we then do that, we're exporting jobs. That's why a majority of our young people are not employed at the moment. So that is a basket of things that I would say we need to look at in order to ensure that we understand what is at stake. And if the ANC is to win again, they will have to actually do things, not just say things, do things that endear the electorate so that in the end, the electorate can have trust that they are able to actually deal with these things that I've mentioned. Thank you very much.
And thank you for the introductory statement, Mr. CADOGAN. And those are the peculiarities of the country, and of course what will become of the governance system in South Africa. These elections going to change the narratives 30 years after gaining the first democratic elections that saw the accession of Nelson Mandela of blessed memory as the president of South Africa, and the ruling National Congress seems to be in turmoil at the moment of a turning point, not just in South Africa and in the global world at large. And of course, we're talking about South African elections. Just to note that South Africa remains one of those nations across the African continent that has understood international politics, and we can see how involved the country has been on global issues. So the elections in South Africa is also having a lot, or will also have a lot to do with its foreign policy, diplomacy, and all the like. So this time around, I want to introduce to you Yulia BERG, a political scientist and founder of GLOBUS Expert Club, who is joining in today's analysis as we take focus on the stakes surrounding the upcoming national elections in South Africa. Yulia, what are your general perspectives regarding the developments pertaining the political life of South Africa, as this one of Africa's economies is praising for historic and crucial elections this 2024, 29th of May?
Well, I would start off saying that South Africa definitely is one of the most interesting and complex countries, not just at the continent's landscape, but also at the global landscape, because the history, the challenges that the people of South Africa had to go through, and the different ways they had to search for, and in some cases find, in some cases the pursuit still continues, to live in harmony and unity given the complex history. So when you look at the historical background, when you look at the all the different groups, let's say social groups that the country consists of, and all of the really harsh challenges that it had to go through, including apartheid, which definitely still has a lot of consequences also on the political life, it's very impressive. And for many years, South Africa has been the flagship of the African continent, being one of the first countries to introduce new procedures to achieve economic growth and to achieve really a lot in terms of development, not just of infrastructure, but also social and political life. So there is a lot that can be praised in South Africa. And of course, the ruling party of the country, the ANC, has a long history that is more than a century old, right? And it has a lot of achievements, a lot of heroes, a lot of visionaries, a lot of practitioners that knew how to put policies in practice. But now we see that they have been in power for 30 years. And all of the institutions, organizations, and including political parties go through different stages of development that at some points include crisis. So now we're observing a critical moment, 30 years after the ANC and Nelson Mandela leading it, who won the election to change the country's history forever. We see that the internal issues and the infrastructural systematic problems that cannot be easily fixed, they play their role, because the issues that were just mentioned in the previous speech by Mr. PHARUMELE, including corruption that a lot of people are talking about, including energy crisis, including high crime rates, water issues that the country is facing this year, for example. Those are not easy to fix, and those require a lot of resources, and moreover, those require a strategy and external partnership. That's key, I believe. So South Africa, being a country that on the one hand has really close ties with Great Britain or United Kingdom and the United States, and on the other hand, it's actively involved with China, India historically as well, Russia, and historically Soviet Union that has always stood side by side with South Africa in the fight against apartheid. So we see that the country is kind of caught in between the different powers at the geopolitical arena, but cooperation with them is absolutely essential to fix those big infrastructural issues, for example, like energy or like security and many others. So the rise of small political parties is also quite a logical step in terms of development of the political and party system. And if you look at, other historical examples and if you do some retrospective analysis in pretty much any country, those are normal stages that political systems develop through. So the next thing that will definitely happen after the election, regardless of the result, because there is already an estimation of what the result could look like, and regardless of the fact if the ANC gets more than 50% or not, if it stays somewhere at the level of 42, 45, we will see that the small parties will start forming coalitions, or some of them will be taken in by soaked in by bigger political parties, because at the moment, of course, there is a lot of disappointment. At the moment, there are issues that the ANC was not extremely effective in solving. Right. Of course, the consequences of the pandemic, when a lot of jobs were lost and there was already quite a bad situation in terms of unemployment, some other issues that were not effectively fixed. So they lead to, let's say, fresh blood coming in. Sorry about that. Fresh blood coming in. And some leaders trying to, just pull the power towards their own side. So Zuma definitely has the right to do so because he had the experience, but he was maybe a bit luckier to run the country in better times, let's say, because at least the pandemic that has shaken up the whole globe was not there. The major geopolitical crisis that we have been living in for the last couple of years was not there. And of course, some new leaders that were losing their positions within the parties, like Mr. Maimane, who was leading the Democratic Alliance for a while, and now he's out, and now he has his own political party, or Julius Malema, who has a more radical position, but basically he stands on the very same grounds that the ANC. And basically what Malema is doing, he's just trying to make sure that the promises made by the ANC and the initial manifestos actually come into life. So there is no major clash in terms of values, in terms of strategies, but there is a clash between EFF and the ANC in terms of implementation, I believe, and in terms of the methods, and in terms of just giving some, fresh flow to the politics. So it's, I think it's an aging problem, or I'd rather say it's a crisis of getting more mature. So we will see how the ANC gets out of it, because the initial, let's say, euphoria, when you get the power, when you get the resources, you get the access, sometimes you exaggerate on also, going into personal benefits and trying to put something out of it into your own pocket, right? So this was happening in any country that chose democracy as a governing regime, right, or governing system. So we will see, but South Africa is definitely one of the most interesting countries to observe also because of its rich culture, political culture, amazing history, and an incredible mix of, languages, 11 official ones, and so many other ones actually spoken in the country, and such different ethnic groups from Zulu to, Shona, that is also quite big, to, all kinds of, pretty much you can find anything in South Africa, but being kind of an African Babylon is quite complicated, because you need to find balances, checks and balances, and you need to find your way through navigating through those issues.
And of course, it's about navigating through the issues to avoid the country actually witnessing some unhealthy scenarios that will further deteriorate infrastructure or derail the economic trajectory of a country. Elections, of course, are a turning point in the life of a nation. And we want to acknowledge the presence of King Kabbalah, who is National Coordinator Black African Defense League South Africa. You are welcome to the program, sir. And we can hear from the different analysis actually advocated by the experts who have spoken before you. We identified some sort of a political disagreement at the level of, when PASEKA underlined that the political coalition is not necessarily to affect the governance system of the country, but it's to see how maybe politicians will benefit from such move. So what do you have to say pertaining this crucial aspect of political coalition in the life of maybe the governance system in South Africa that would determine the life of the country after the 29th May national elections in the country?
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to all African people, those on the continent and those abroad.
Yeah.
Peace and love, freedom and equalization to all of you. Well, I think all the analysis made so far are very accurate. If I can add something on what is the issue as well on South African political field, I would say that what is happening in South Africa now, at this particular election, increase the number of political parties or political groupings that have come into play. And I don't see this very remote from what has been happening in the rest of Africa, since the independence period. In a nutshell, I would say that the Western powers or Western countries have tried always to make sure that after the independence, whatever that the countries of the global South, particularly Africa, try to do to improve themselves, failed, or fell, so to say. So that they can come back and then say, oh, show the world that, look, we have left these people to guide or to govern themselves as well. Therefore, we have a justification to meddle into their face. So that's what we see in South Africa. I understand, it's also true that there are cases of corruption, management of resources by the ruling party, but the major problem or the major game being played in this particular election now is that the Western powers, those who control the system of economy in South Africa, have funded many political parties to make sure that ANC cannot remain in power solely as a governing body or governing structure of South Africa. Why? Because if you have one single body in charge of a country, it is easy to come up with the policies of development and implement them easily and get the country moving in one direction, right? But if you have a country that is led by coalition of many political blocs with different ideologies, different visions about what South Africa to be, how to become, then you have a difficult situation in terms of policy creation as well as policy implementation, because every participating political grouping will want to see the country moving according to its own ideology. And I'm saying that because there's a proof already. You can see that in Cape Town, Western Cape, there's a tendency to separate Cape Town from the rest of the country, to make it a separate country. The reason being that the bottom line, obviously, being that these people who are pushing that agenda, they don't want to be led by a black-owned or black-led political party, which is the ANC or any other political party, whether it's the EFF or another political party, but being eventually championed by a black face. They don't want to see that kind of situation. So they want to create a separate country, their own country, where they can live among themselves. You go inside South Africa itself, you see itself, you can find other groupings of, exclusive to certain races, such as white, you can talk about Orania, all those kind of things. So there's been already tendency since the 1994 to make sure that, or actually to refuse to be led by a black, controlled political party. So that has built into some kind of strategies of undermining whatever that ANC has been doing, starting from destructuring the state-owned enterprises, where they talk about the airline, enterprise, which is the South African Airways. When they talk about the train, company, all those things have been actually dismantled in one way or another, so that they can be owned by private enterprises that are controlled by the minority. You see, and today we have a situation of Eskom, which is the nation, which is the state-owned enterprise in energy production, which is also in trouble. Basically, the trouble being when you trust the bottom line is being eventually created to make sure that the ruling party is discredited in the eyes of the public, and at the same time you have a lot of political parties, coming like mushroom to destabilize or to steal the votes, to take some votes from ANC so that ANC cannot come up with 50% votes and to be the sole ruler of the country. And in that moment, you have a situation of coalition whereby DA comes now and say, okay, you know what, we want to be participant, but want this. Yeah. And most basically what DA will want is to block the expropriation of the land without compensation, which has been the backbone of the Freedom Charter, or I should say of the freedom, I should say of the end of apartheid. There was supposed to be an economic economic justice, to put an end to inequality that we see in South Africa. So DA will never gonna want that to happen, and other political parties that are mushrooming, being funded by the Oppenheimer and other political funders or lobbyist groups in South Africa, they wouldn't want to do that. So it's gonna be if it happens that ANC loses, the majority in terms of the result of this election, is going to be difficult to see South Africa moving in terms of moving in the direction on which it has set for itself since 1994, or most particularly, it's going to be difficult to achieve the Agenda 2030, which South African government set for itself in order to develop economy, reduce inequality, and then build more infrastructures and eventually create sustainable development. So that is going to be a chaos after the May elections if ANC doesn't win, or even if the coalition between ANC or EFF doesn't come into power. It's going to be difficult to see all those things being achieved in South Africa. So this is basically a critical analysis that can be made in terms of the political development of the country. That's what we can say for now. Thank you.
Much King Kabala for the insight, and we are going to continue in the same perspective as we continue to identify to I can see that the Republic of South Africa has seen itself in what I can say a complex web. And now coming back to you, Dr. Charles Sinkala, from the analysis which I've gathered so far from all of your importer, we want to understand the major stakes. That is what seems to be behind the political changes across the African or this Republic of South Africa. What explanation can you now give to unravel this complex web, political web that the Republic of South Africa finds itself now ahead of the national elections, and how this political plurality in terms of the number of political parties is not helping to define a clear trajectory for the country now and even in the next 5 years after the elections?
Well, thank you so much, Clarice, once again. You know, it's a complex analogy in terms of the predicament where ANC has found itself. And I think some other experts have indicated that this is a disintegration of the ANC itself, because most of the problems they have actually internally caused them, instead of having a situation where to harmonize a political party, have the South Africans, most of them who do not understand the geopolitics and the internal politics, understand and to be part of the ANC as it has been for the past 30 years. And I think it is also safe to say that, as I indicated earlier, that liberation movements have got only one job or specific task to do, is to liberate the people from the atrocities of the apartheid, which the ANC had achieved, with the flying colors. But one will also find a battle to govern, as that is the main biggest problem in terms of governance in the African continent. Yes, we can win the war against the imperialists and the colonial masters, the apartheid and so on, but how do we govern our countries? How do we govern our people? How do we make sure that we've got economical power as celebrated by the political power? But if you can see that ANC only started working probably in the last 11 years or 12 years, if not less than that, most of the time post the 1994 elections, they were celebrating, they were celebrating that they've arrived. They were celebrating that they have taken over the biggest battle that they have ever fought in the history of politics in South Africa. They celebrated those who were caged at the Robben Island. They celebrated that people are free. But the question South Africans has always asked, what are we free from? If you see the composite of the cabinets in the last three parliament, you can see that these were former either MKA who fought, with tooth and neck in the liberation of the South African people during the fight against the apartheid. You can see that most of them, maybe they were incarcerated either within South Africa or outside. They were trying to pay them off. And I think that period of drama has passed, and we can see during the nominations of now the current elections that almost maybe more than 20 of them, they are not going to be part and parcel of the dispensation of democratic dispensation as going forward. Those are the changes that has actually changed now the landscape. Now, can we go back to work? Of course, yes, we can say that the ANC has tried. Many of the things has never been mentioned of the good thing that the ANC has done, apart from the liberating of the South African people. But to the larger extent, South Africa is a big country, and a lot of people are looking forward that the government do more than what it is doing. Of course, corruption and other vices. Not long ago now, the highest lawmaker, member of parliament, and also the Speaker of the National Assembly, was arrested yesterday. And these are things that, the ANC are trying to turn away from, by convincing the electorate that we are not whom you think. We are actually the liberation movement that shall set you free, better free than where you are at. It is a very difficult battle, in fact, to convince the electorates, notwithstanding the fact that internal fights has actually disintegrated the ANC. The splinter parties which has come out of the ANC has also exacerbated. I think, I was speaking to one of the colleagues into our political spheres. I mentioned that, ANC actually shot its own foot when it asked the president, by then Thabo Mbeki, to resign. And that also followed to President Jacob Zuma, who was forced to resign. And as well, we don't know what is going to happen now, but we predict that there will be as well another revolt against the President Cyril Ramaphosa within the ANC. And this also speaks to the prophecy as well of, the most celebrated political icon, Nelson Mandela, who said the ANC cannot be removed by any other vices, but to destroy itself internally. And this is exactly what we are seeing. But, all in all is well in South Africa. South Africa enjoys the democratic dispensation and transition of power. We don't hope to see a lot of violence like most of the analysts have perceived. Most African people within the South African continent, they are quite peaceful. But what we predict, and many other analysts have predicted, is that the ANC now will no longer have the majority rule. Yes, they had 53% in the last election, 54%, but it's the same percentage, a little bit over the 50% mark. They might have less than that, either 51% or 49%, which will bring now the other political parties, of course, to the table. But the question is, the coalition governments, which has tried time and after again within the South African continent, South African nation, rather, not a continent, but, they have failed on the local government, they have failed on the provincial government, they have failed on the national government. We're not sure that, the ANC might go in bed with either the EFF or any other political party, including the DA, who has maintained their lead as the second largest political party in South Africa. Okay. But, I think putting all these things and the politics and the geopolitics and as well as the internal problems and as well as the recessions, the COVID pandemic and all the hardships that the people of South Africa has gone through, the question is, why can't all these political parties work together and, come up with a vibrant political system that can liberate the South Africans once and for all?
That is where the problematic lies, and it brings us to the question of political rhetorics and how political rhetorics is helping to derail the political life or transformation of the continent Africa. And like you've underlined, Dr. Sinkala, it is imperative to understand the geopolitical stakes and the implications of what it is happening in South Africa, especially the political transformation of the country. Coming back to what you said earlier on PASEKA, PHARUMELE, you were so categorical to say South Africa is in a position of danger, and you highlighted some sort of external partnerships which are not very favorable and can help to maybe change narratives even on the pending presidential elections. Can you elucidate more on this danger that you are so categorical on, and how can this be averted to see that South Africa doesn't find itself in similar post-election turbulence or violence?
Sorry, Clarice, I don't think that was what I was specifically saying in terms of the aspect of where South Africa stands. If anything, I was trying to make the argument that South Africa, it's been said that South Africa is in a position that is dangerous for many years. But in actual fact, post-94, we did not see massacres as it was anticipated. Absolutely. That we would see. We would see some kind of civil war. Mm-hmm. The only danger that I fear is the danger that one of the colleagues mentioned, that post-election, if the ANC was to leave power, we would see something similar to some of the dangers that we've seen throughout the continent in countries where people were not willing to let go of power. That is more theoretical. However, I do not see the election, the ANC actually losing the election. That is less likely as compared to the chances of them actually winning, because chances are, even if they receive that less than 50%, chances are someone is going to go into coalition with the ANC. So it means that statistically they are more likely to retain power, even though the only difference would be they do not have ultimate power. They have to co-share some power with someone. And that is what I was hinting at, how the DA is willing to go into coalition with the ANC, because they can also see practically they are actually not an option for South Africa, because they might make the argument that they are, but they do not offer any solutions moving forward. We also see a similar thing with the EFF as of late, because a huge majority of us had anticipated that in this election, I apologize for that, in this election, the EFF would have a higher power grip in the electorate. They would have higher numbers in terms of the people who would be willing to vote for them. To be honest, the only party that I'm seeing that might shock me, which I do not anticipate, is the MK party of the former president, because it seems as though people genuinely believe that the MK holds any sense of a chance of actually taking the position of the EFF or contesting the EFF as the third strongest party in the country. I do not see that happening, honestly. However, I do see some analysts out there saying that they do have an ability and capability of actually turning themselves into some kind of kingmaker. That on its own, though, is what I think is actually a possibility of setting South Africa in a trajectory that we do not anticipate, and that which we do not want. Which specifically they have said themselves that if certain things are not achieved, they are willing to go to war for this country. That puts us in a very dangerous position, because they have positioned themselves as those who are so radical that they are willing to wage civil war in the country. And now we have seen the DA itself also try to call on the West, specifically America, to come and observe the South African election, because they do not believe on the freeness and fairness of the South African election. Basically putting us in a position where we question the system, the IEC system, which is basically the independent body responsible for South Africa's elections. So with that being said, I think that we find ourselves in a peculiar position. But as I had indicated initially, I do not personally see us being in a position of danger where we have civil war and whatnot. But the one problem that I do project and I do anticipate might happen, putting us in danger, is the ANC retaining ultimate power and then continuing to collapse the country, but not to the extent that specifically right-wingers have thought that we would find the ANC collapsing the country. I think it will take a lot longer, and I hope that it does not happen. But that is my anticipation, Clarice. I hope that
all we can hope for to see that we have a peaceful post-election 2024 in South Africa. And on the aspect of election observation, coming to you, Mr. Good News CADOGAN, let's analyze this aspect of election observation, because when we talk elections, we talk observation, we talk cooperation and interference. So now, let me bring this question to you. Do you think the coalition government will position South Africa well on the global landscape that can avoid this some sort of negative, I call it negative interference, and promote more of a win-win cooperation? Mr. PHARUMELE just highlighted there's a group of political parties that have actually called for external bodies to come into South Africa to ensure that the elections are conducted peacefully. But then we want to look at the implications of such act.
I don't believe that global observation bodies being present in our country during elections will have any impact. Because if we have got nothing to hide, we shouldn't worry who comes to observe. So in the end, they will be observing and seeing us as a government that is open, transparent, and authentic. There are three things that I mentioned earlier on that I said are important in this election that will sort of be a deciding factor. The first one is the values of the politicians. And these values should be judged by the ideals and the founding principles of our Constitution. And transparency is one of those that are in our Constitution as we have it today. The second thing is about philosophy. Of all these parties that are competing for elections, there's only one party, the ANC, that is a major contributor to the architecture of our Constitution. And therefore, it is closest in beliefs and values to the founding principles of our Constitution. But having said that, what is important is what are the values of the individual leaders who represent the ANC? Are they in sync with our Constitution? Are the values of individual leaders that sit in the other political parties, are they in sync with our Constitution? And the answer is not quite, because most of them did not get into politics on the ticket of having strong beliefs about our Constitution. Most of them are self-serving, most of them are there for self-enrichment, and very few are there to serve the public. And it's for that reason then that we should actually, as electorate, have a direct impact on who gets into government and who becomes president. And currently, the electoral laws or act that we have does not allow for that direct choice by the electorate. There's a need for us to shift towards a direct impact of our votes as the electorate in terms of who becomes president, who becomes a national representative in government, who becomes a provincial representative in government, and who becomes a local representative in government.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cadogan. With you, Yulia Berger, while talking now, Mr. Cadogan was categorical and saying if a country has nothing to hide, the country will not actually have a problem if external bodies are coming to observe elections. But then you actually from Russia, and if I have the news correct, actually the United States was, there are reports that the United States was trying to interfere in the elections in Russia, and then even in South Africa, you know, there is an update regarding the fact that the CIA has been spying on the African ANC, African National Congress. And so now we want to look at how the involvement of such and especially can deter the results of the elections and the impact or the implications of such on the country after the elections period, and also to underline the aspect of interference on the political life and how it will affect even the country's position at the international level.
Well, the United States have very clear economic interests and quite a lot of joint businesses in South Africa, and that's why they're trying to protect basically their assets. So it's no secret for anyone that there is quite big American presence in the country in terms of businesses, in terms of analytics, in terms of intelligence. Yeah. And it has been that way for quite a while. But what needs to be distinguished is the difference between presence, between influence, and between trying to change the processes radically, right?
Absolutely.
Because presence, there is nothing much about it. It's, you know, quite a normal process of working towards one's interests. But if it happens in an open and fair way, then there is no issue with that. Then when you have what the Americans call the soft power, mostly have regime change as their ultimate goal, or let's say attempts to control the government and to control the governmental decisions, both at the geopolitical level and in terms of internal issues. That kind of control basically allows to push for, you know, their own interests. So it's the same difference as you have with, you know, just asking someone to do something in an open and clear manner and manipulation. So at the human being level, what we call manipulation is when someone is supposed to do something against their own interest. So
Absolutely,
here, I think the key point to analyze is whether what the American influence is pushing for is actually in the interests of South Africa and the people of South Africa or not, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about the people, we should probably talk about the majority, because if it's something in the interest of, let's say, some elites or oligarchs, probably we should not really call them people in this kind of cases. So yes, the United States have been very active in their foreign policy all over the world, and they have established various kinds of NGOs. They have been providing funding for various kinds of projects, which basically allowed them to be able to reach, even as they say, you know, an old lady in a remote village.
Yeah.
This is how far the outreach of the American NGO networks has gone, right?
Sure.
And they have been quite effective in that. But the question we need to ask in the first place is, you know, if what they're actually doing is in the interests of the people that they're trying to influence or not. So when we talk about South Africa as well, the American presence is huge, and some of it is, you know, probably constructive in terms of doing business, in terms of bringing in technologies and you know, funding and whatsoever else. But if that is about trying to control the government and make it lose its sovereignty as an entity, as an actor, both at the geopolitical arena and in terms of you know, their own critical decisions, then we definitely should say that, you know, it's a negative kind of influence. For example, you have a huge energy crisis in South Africa, and the problem has been there for decades by now, right?
Sure.
And if there are some solutions that, for example, China or Russia can provide, then South African government should examine the projects and decide what is, do the cost-benefit analysis and decide which project is better for them, the Russian one, the French one, or some Chinese project, right? And they should make the decision based on this, you know, just business, nothing personal. But if they're not advised to do so for some reason, like, no, don't cooperate with China because it's our potential enemy, then we have a problem.
Indeed, that's where the bone of contention lies, and all the decisions or the political decisions that will be taken in South Africa before and after the 2024 elections will have a lot to do in the life of the country, both internally and at the global stage. Coming to you, King Kebela, we want to look at, of course, how these changes in South Africa, especially the declining popularity of the African National Congress. How will this impact South Africa's global standing and even its foreign elections? Are there any potential consequences for economic partnerships or even diplomatic engagement as far as these the life of the ANC is concerned, and other developments around the political life of the country?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think it all depends on who comes into power after the election in May this year. But as it has been argued, it's most likely that ANC is still going to be in power, probably in coalition with other political parties if it doesn't reach up to 50%. Now, the decline in popularity of South African Congress, I think it's due to generational change. Also, maybe also due to mismanagement, as I pointed out earlier on, of the resources and of the country in general by the leaders of the ANC. But we are now facing a new generation, most of them who didn't live through the apartheid regime. Because one thing is that ANC has been into power through the rhetoric of apartheid and what happened in 1994 for the country to change and to become what it is today as a democratic country. But look, the young people today who are coming out of school, have degrees, they want good job, they want better life. They don't live with that rhetoric. They have to see substantial results in terms of getting job, reducing unemployment and having good salary, living a decent life. Many of them are still, are born and still living in a concentration camps that we call townships, where the living conditions there are really inhumane. So I think there are a lot of things here coming into play, dealing with the new generation. You're dealing also with the economic decline, which is not just solely based on the mismanagement of the resources of the country, but most importantly, based on the decline of the capitalist system itself in the world. The economic difficulty that we are living through today, it's across the globe. The Western countries themselves are in a decline, economically speaking. So it cannot spare South Africa as a satellite state of the global capitalism. So that has to be really understood. And unfortunately, there are a lot of politicians, right-wing politicians, who are coming up with a populist rhetoric during the election time to point fingers on this part of the economy or this part of the population as being responsible for whatever that is happening in the country today, which is not true. Because I believe that if you have a situation of unemployment, a situation of economic decline, what needs is solutions that can elevate the country. But pointing finger, when a potential leader comes up and start pointing fingers to other people to say that you are suffering because so and so is doing this and that, that means doesn't have a solution for the problem that the country is facing. So now in a nutshell, I think whatever that will happen will depend on who will be in power after the May election this year. If it is DA in power, for example, we can expect DA to continue using South Africa as a substructure of imperialism in Africa, because we know during the apartheid era, South Africa was mainly used by the Western powers to destabilize all the countries around in sub-Saharan countries in terms of fighting against colonialism. South Africa was used to counter those measures and eventually to create some kind of destabilization in those countries, right? It was actually the arm and the eye of Western imperialism in Africa. So if it comes that DA is in power, we can expect South Africa to be going through that direction. If it's EFF, we can expect some kind of a radical change that can eventually also just make things suddenly difficult before we can see the light of any prospect, a light of any better future. And if it is ANC, then we'll have to look into what strategy they will come up with in order to counter corruption within the party, in terms of creating more employment and stuff like that. So it all depends as to who wins the power, or what is the level of other political parties. If it has to be a coalition, what's the level of other political parties that will be making that coalition, after this election, so that we see, where the country will be heading to. But in a nutshell, that's how the situation looks like.
I will stay with you, Kabela, talking about the development that will come in South Africa, pertaining who becomes the next leader of the country. In your opinion, who do you think the coalition government, if actually there is one, will benefit? Is it the population of South Africa, or maybe the political figures or political leaders themselves? We identified many problems that the country is facing at the moment: load shedding, unemployment, corruption, and many. In case of this political coalition, which is a very crucial issue in South Africa, is it going to benefit South Africans, the population, and actually bring respite to some of the problems that the country is facing?
Well, It's difficult to say. It's difficult to say. Why? Because, as I said, it also depends on the nature of that coalition. DA has already shown its interest to go into coalition with South Africa, same as EFF, and anything is possible. But if it happens that EFF goes into coalition with the ANC, it might be a situation where both of them are counterbalancing each other. But basically, as we're speaking now, because ANC is going to be in the picture again for quite a long time, I think for whatever that has happened during this term, it has put some some people into spotlights within the ANC, so that they have to restructure their strategy to make sure that the people of South Africa will be the primary beneficiaries of the economy of this country. You see, it is true that there's been a lot of mismanagement of the economy during this period, which when you also look closely, you see that is not really the cause for the economic situation, is not the main cause for people of South Africa not benefiting from their country. Because look, when they talk about looting in with the ANC, they talk about corruption. You're talking in context of $400 billion US dollars. That was the last estimate from the looting of Guptas and stuff like that. But when you look into the money that is kept this country, because what has to be understood is that before the end of apartheid, major corporations were based in South Africa. Where they talk about Anglo-Americans, major corporations, the old mutuals, all these corporations were based in South Africa. Right after the apartheid, they moved their headquarters to London. So it means all the profits, all the money of this country is being channeled toward London, right? Toward outside of South Africa. So that is the major point. And when you try to calculate what leaves this country in terms of money, profit going out of the country through the official channels that are not considered as corruption, is in terms of trillions of US dollars. But we focus more only on the 400s of looting, which is bad, of course, which need to be condemned. But the whole media propaganda has been built around the corruption, which is like, I don't know, like 10% or in a tiny portion of whatever that Anglo-American, all these countries takes out of the country. So for the people of this country to benefit, there has to be a going back to the fundamentals. It means people of this country must be the ones who are in charge of the means of production and distribution of the economy of the country. So it doesn't matter who comes in power, whether it's ANC remaining in power or EFF, but if the means of production and distribution of resource, of wealth, is not transferred to the majority, eventually the people of South Africa cannot benefit from the economy of the country or from whatever coalition that will happen after the election of this year. So there has to be going back to that fundamentals where there's major structure or restructuring of the economy, which of course is not in the opinion of DA, but which EFF seems to be embracing. We hope that ANC will have to escalate, that strategy to make sure that people of South Africa can keep on trusting the ANC, and that's how I look at it.
Okay, thank you for that insight. Let me continue with you, dear Yulia. Kebala highlighted one very important aspect about the resources of a country, the production. Some time ago we were talking about seeing how Africa can move from a consumption to a production continent, and of course we are still looking at how the stakes, the political stakes in South Africa, and how the outcome can redefine especially perspectives patterning the economic trajectory or some economic decisions taken by the country. And when we talk about the presence of foreign powers, either for business or for whatever reason, we want to underline to understand how a country can redefine its foreign policy or even its diplomatic relations to see that the decisions taken in any relationship or partnership with other parties should not kill the economy. So now the question is, do you think the outcome of the elections will change, help South Africa to redefine its foreign policy and even diplomatic relations to curtail some sort of negative effect of too much infringement, even in the decision making as far as the distribution, like Kabbalah had highlighted, is concerned, and even how the resources in the country are being managed?
Well, let me split it into two parts. So part one is about the resources and how to make them work for a country's own benefit.
Absolutely.
So the best way here, the best way here is to have the added value, which is to produce more sophisticated goods that would be sold at the open and free market at a fair price, right? So South Africa is quite good at that. Yet a bit of a problem is that they do not own much of their industry, right? Meaning that those are not in all the cases, the beneficiaries would be South African actors. Yet at the same time, South Africa has introduced quite a lot of laws and quite good and high quality legislation that is aimed to support local businessmen, to support those groups that were previously misprivileged, right? And they're quite good at making sure that the legislation contains all the norms and principles that are focused on protecting local producers and protecting the local market and local economy, right? So when you talk about state tenders, when you talk about various kinds of projects, there are requirements that most of the whatever you use in the project has to be produced there, and the country even closes up for certain kinds of imports in order to make sure that their own industries do develop. So that's point one. But point two, when you talk about long-term strategic goals and when you talk about long-term economic growth, you need to have a complex strategy that would take a while to implement, right? And in order to be able to elaborate and actually realize, which is implement such a strategy, you need to have stable government, which doesn't change every 4 years, let's say, but which is stable enough to make plans for decades. So one of the secrets of the Chinese economic miracle is exactly their strategic planning. So they're thinking in terms of generations, right? But in the South African Republic, you always have to navigate. You navigate the external arena between the different interests, and you navigate through the complicated interest groups within the country, and moreover, within the ANC as a political party. When you don't have a system that ensures stable leadership for a while, this is what you have to face. So I would say that in order to be able to implement this kind of strategies, either the ruling party, whether it's ANC or a coalition or some other party, doesn't matter, they would have to have strategic planning and make sure that they're capable of making it happen, or else there has to be some project or let's say some strategy that is above the interest groups, and they might differ in terms of some of the methods, some of the points of focus, but the overall strategy has to be shared by everyone. In South Africa, that's the problem, I believe, that there is no common vision, and when you have a constant change of actors within the ANC or in terms of political parties, there is no stable ground to stand on. And the same happens to look at the government, right? Sure. So the ministers shuffle and reshuffle continuously. The vice ministers, which is like the team, so they come to take the position the first couple of years, you always need the first couple of years in order to effectively understand how things work and be able to implement. Absolutely. And then you already have to go. And in this kind of a situation, there is no big project you can implement if you count months instead of counting years, if not decades.
And of course, it's where we have the bone of contention. Mr. PHARUMELE, in line with the development leading up to the presidential or national elections in South Africa, you know, I would love to know, do you think in any way like recent geopolitical events or even internal conflicts have influenced the political dynamics in the lead up to the elections in South Africa? When we see, let's still capitalize on this issue of the coalition, can it be as a result of some major geopolitical events which have occurred around the globe and even internal wrangling within South Africa? It should be noted in 2016, the economic freedom fighters were very categorical about not forming a coalition with the ruling African National Congress. But then the story is different for 2024. Can it be in any way linked to some sort of recent geopolitical happenings or changes which have occurred in the world at large?
Thank you, Clarice. With the economic freedom fighters, specifically the EFF, I think their transition is not based off any external factors, but based off their own reality and awakening to where they stand. As I did indicate initially, the EFF, when it came into politics, when Julius Malema and the likes decided that they are going to start a political party, it had a mandate, which was a mandate to take over, replace the ANC. But what happened was they got a surprising amount of votes in that election. Realistically, it is easy to take things that come from social media and work with the assumption that they underachieved. No, the EFF overachieved. And in all the previous elections, in the elections that they've participated in, they've overachieved. Yeah. For such a starter party, for a beginning party, and that is why they became a threat to the DA, as much as the DA will not openly acknowledge and admit that they see the EFF as a threat. So the EFF's position, it came down to them realizing that the chances of them overtaking the ANC have actually gone down as compared to back in 2020, 2016, I think, because based off the simple fact that the EFF, I meant to say actually, yeah. The EFF has not strengthened its standing, its public standing, how the people view it and observe it has not been the same. If anything, they've lost a bit of credibility. I think that they will do decently, but they will not do as good as we had initially anticipated they would do post the previous election, because now, if anything, they have started to decline based off what a huge majority of the population finds as problematic standings, not necessarily policy, but what they say, what they come out and say. So that out of the table now. The idea and ideology of coalitions are always based off one principle. Both parties if it's only two, and multiple if it's more than two. Yeah. Both parties go into a coalition with the aim of a benefit or benefiting something at the end of the coalition. But in reality, what happens is there's supposed to be someone who is stronger politically in that position, who has more power in that position to say, who has more votes specifically, to make the argument that I make the final decision. However, I will not neglect the opinions that you make. And I think that is why the coalition in Johannesburg between the EFF and the DA collapsed, because now there was a blurred line in which the EFF thought that they had more power than they actually did. Yeah. You know, when they went into discussion with the DA, that was a coalition that was meant to work to govern a city. But now think about it from a countrywide perspective. what do we anticipate to be a successful coalition countrywide if it was never a successful coalition in a city alone? So the reality of the matter is that the decision of these parties that have come out to say that they are willing to go into coalition, specifically the DA and the EFF. And another thing that has happened is that there's this coalition, they call it a pact, which has the DA, which has Action SA, and a number of other parties, which is aiming to come together so that they can collect their votes and then they can go and oppose the ANC. I think the DA has noticed that that coalition that they've, that pact that they have developed is not going to be very powerful. So based off the DA's own understanding, that the logic for them to say that they'd be willing to go into a coalition with the ANC is based off one thing. It's for them to make sure that they also get a cut of the cake. And they are being realistic, because the problem is, in terms of ideology and principle, the DA and the ANC are more closer than the DA is close to the EFF. If anything, the ANC stands at the center. If we look at South African politics and their positionality, the ANC stands at the center of the DA and the EFF. Sure. And the ANC stands more center as compared to the VF Plus, which is an Africanist, the nationalist party. And I don't know who, because South Africa, what they've done is that they've gotten rid of the really radical parties. The EFF is just too powerful. They were going to get rid of them as well. But the really pro-black extreme left parties cannot survive in the context of South Africa, because there's ways to get rid of them or to position them in positions of non-relevance, you know. So what I'm saying is that the EFF, the reason why you have these two countries that can be seen as something of polar opposites, specifically the DA and the EFF, be willing to work with the ANC, is primarily because the ANC is the country that actually holds center position in politics more than any other party in this country. And because and based off that, we find ourselves in a position where both these parties are willing to go into coalition governance with them. But in a realistic point of view, it is not going to be successful, because I cannot point to one extremely successful coalition that has happened after the local elections that had happened in the country. None of them have actually worked, because people do not actually understand the technicalities that come with a coalition. Absolutely, it's the same as shareholding. Not everyone has the same vote. Not everyone has the same power or the same vote, the same voice. Voices should depend based off one thing, which is the amount of votes that you actually hold. Whoever has more should have the ability to say more and take more decisions. Thank you, Clarice.
Decisions that will favor the country, decisions that will favor the nationals. And in the same perspective with you, Dr. Charles Sinkala, we are being critical looking at how the political maneuver of countries across the African continent, and particularly South Africa, looking at the effect that political decisions do have on the transformation, the development of the nation. While talking earlier on, you highlighted some internal factors, the fact that President Mbeki was forced to resign, and now Jacob Zuma resigning, and of course he's under another umbrella of another political party. So the question that I want us to understand and also look at the implications of such on the political life and even the pending elections in South Africa is from what you said earlier on, can we arrive a conclusion that the political internal political wranglings between among political parties in South Africa seems to be overshadowing the let me say the major objective or general objective of the country, or decisions, political decisions that will move the country forward? Politicians bent on solving their internal issues rather than looking at problems faced by the country as a whole, and how will this affect the outcome of the elections come May?
Sorry, Clarice, I think we did lose Dr. Sinkala.
Sorry for that. And of course, we are rounding off already, but we continue to analyze. I think I will direct this question to you, PASEKA PHARUMELE. How this internal wrangling among political parties will derail the country's political life, especially in decision making that will solve the problems which we have identified on the African National Congress. And you mentioned that the African National Congress is actually at the center of it all. So now let's look at how this internal wrangling among political parties is overshadowing the political sphere of the country and the effects of such.
Thank you very much, Clarice. Thank you very much. You know, I think Yulia
said
something that is very important. Yulia said something that is very important about the maturity of the ANC. I hope that it was her who made that point about how it was her who said that you need a prolonged period to actually see change.
Absolutely.
And
was Yulia.
With her having had said that, I somewhat do agree with that, because I do see the immaturity of the ANC's governance in that they got too excited after getting power, and then after getting too excited, as a child would get excited with a new toy, after getting too excited, they didn't take enough time to be able to govern. And I think Dr. Sankala was the one who was speaking about, if you look at the ANC recently, only recently have we seen the ANC actually governing the country, being very productive in their governance, where we see them actually doing work. And I think those 2 points are very important for us to understand where the ANC stands right now. The problem is the ANC, I genuinely believe, as much as I have my own problems with the ANC, I genuinely believe that the ANC is not as useless as we tend to try and make it sound. The ANC is not totally useless. The ANC is actually doing some work. There are people within the ANC who are trying to do some work, and especially over the last few years, as I said, with the point that Dr. Sankala and Yulia made earlier, whereby these people are actually in the process of trying to get the country better. Not everyone is broken within the ANC. However, from a different perspective, we look at the people of the country of South Africa, some who have, a large majority actually, who have suffered under apartheid, who have suffered under white supremacy, who have suffered under white suppression, who have suffered under what do you call this, economic oppression, who have suffered under, extreme poverties over multiple decades. These people do not see the ANC as a child that needs to grow so that it can be as successful as it has, as much as people think it has potential to be. These people do not see that, because in the position that these people find themselves in, these people are hungry, they are starving. Economically, things do not make sense to them because everything is more expensive if you do not have access to consistent and perpetual energy, as we recently do for some reason, then you feel as though this is a party that is failing. You do not have electricity consistently, you do not have water in some areas consistently. Your money, it becomes more and more worthless as you go. These people do not see the ANC as a child that needs time for it to grow. These people see the ANC as the poison that they saw the National Party as it was. And it has gotten to a point that these people now are making the argument that in actual fact we live better under the oppressive,
you should be rounding off, please.
Government.
Yeah.
Sorry, Clarice?
You should be rounding off. We have less time.
All right, yeah, under the practical government. But yeah, that was a different point. So all I was saying was that I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we have a lot to say, but of course we'll come back to it subsequently. It's about charting a way forward for the continent, Africa. And coming to you, King Kebela, we have analyzed all of these aspects. Then we want to look at these stakeholders, that is the youthful population population. With all what is happening in South Africa, patterning the different ideologies coming from all the political parties in South Africa, what can we say is the level of youthful consciousness in the political life of South Africa? And do you think their voices will be heard or felt, their presence will be felt in the May slated elections and will effect major changes after the elections?
Yes, yes, of course. One thing for sure is that we still can give a credibility to the EC in South Africa, which is the Independent Electoral Commission in South Africa, is far much better than what we see in West Africa or in Central Africa. Even though they're talking about, you know, foreign or Americans to come and monitor, I don't see the reason for that anyway. We don't see any African country that goes to monitor American elections. So that being said, what I'm trying to say is that eventually the voice of the youth will be heard through this election. But the problem is, what will be that voice speaking to? Because the propaganda is very high in South Africa now. Manipulation by politicians is very high right now. As I've mentioned earlier on, that when politicians don't have accurate solutions to the problem that the people are going through, they will try to shift that problem or to put the blame on easy targets that can be easily identified, to say that you are suffering because of XYZ, and if you vote me into power, I should be able to fix these problems, which is indeed not a true solution that South Africa needs right now, because what is needed in this country is massive investments, you know, in the economy and the maintaining the infrastructures that are busy collapsing. I think those two things are the major avenues that will create more employment in South Africa and eventually reboost the image of South Africa again in Africa and in the world. So yes, the youth will be heard. I mean, their voice or their votes will be counted, but for what reason or what option are they going to choose for is a matter of the, you know, of the propaganda machine that is really running very well in the country as we're speaking now. So it only depends as well, you know, at the level of consciousness of some, because the level of consciousness is very low, not just in South Africa, but everywhere in Africa. The youth are very disengaged to the political activity that need to be really dealt with to define the future. While the youth itself is the future, but being disengaged from politics, you know, you can just imagine what Africa has to become in 10 or 15 years to, you know, ahead of us. So, yes, in a nutshell, their voice are counted, but I just hope that they make a good choice with those voices. Thank you.
That is people's oriented, and of course a leader that is intentional about bringing change. We end with you, dear Yulia, addressing the issue of propaganda. You heard King Kabela just highlighting about some sort of propaganda that could even change predictions or perceptions pertaining the elections in South Africa. And what are the implications of this? Just 2 minutes, please.
Well, I would respond using a quote by one of the famous politicians, and sometimes it is said on the internet, as it happens, that it was Churchill. Sometimes the quote is attributed to some other people, but regardless of who said it, I think they made a good point that you can always only trust the research that you falsificate yourself, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So it means that a lot of what is circulating in the media might be, well, we always have to question how the research is done when we're talking about research that is attempting to be scientific, yet at the same time, it is important to distinguish between the actual data being presented or data being presented in order to create a certain impression. So I think, you know, the main survey or the key poll will be happening at the polling stations at the end of May. And this is exactly when we will see how South Africans would make their mind.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, South Africans would make the decision, this crucial decision on the 29th of May 2024. It's a turning point in the political life of the nation, and it will go a long way to define its position both in Africa and even at the international arena. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, of course, the panel of experts for the insightful discussion pertaining the topic on the table this day on Global Insider. We continue to bring forth constructive analysis to see how we can contribute our own quota positively to change narratives across the African continent that would define itself at the international arena. Thank you so much, and of course I want to appreciate you and keep trusting the Pan-African television. Remember, it's another view of the world, and news is always on the move for you, Major Africa. Do have a lovely weekend in the company of our programs. Bye-bye.